So, I've been wanting to get back into more book reviews and literary analysis and stuff like that. And it seems that every booktuber that I watch seems to have an opinion about this book, Tender is the Flesh by Augustine Bastarrica. And so I wanted to weigh in on that and a few other ideas around that. I read the book last year and I had like mixed to negative thoughts about it. I was not that impressed, but there was some creativity and some interesting moments in there. I'm actually there was enough creativity in there to make me interested in reading in reading some other work by Augustine Bastarrica just to see how it plays out. Because the author has just put out a collection of short stories, and I'm thinking that might actually be more interesting because some writers just do better as short story writers. Writers like Barry Hannah, my favorite author, Harlan Ellison, and things like that. H.P. Lovecraft, Edgar Allan Poe, et cetera, et cetera. It goes on. So maybe that format would work better. But what got me thinking about this book again was that a lot of YouTubers, booktubers, have been describing it as an example of extreme horror. Now, extreme horror as a codified genre is a very new concept. And I'll get into what that means in a minute. But there have been some literary forerunners to the that people have held up as either as early examples of the genre or forerunners to the genre. There's one book by Samuel R. Delany, I believe it's called Hog, if I'm not mistaken. Bret Easton Ellis, American Psycho, this novel, and these are certainly legitimate works of literature with legitimate artistic value and legitimate artistic merit, wider philosophical concepts, and books, novels of ideas, and things like that. But I would argue from what's described in extreme horror, that's precisely what keeps them from being extreme horror, because extreme horror, it sounds like, is not really horror in the truest sense, where there's a build up. There's a build up of fear and shocks along the way, and haunting, creepiness, uncanniness, that sort of thing, an exploration of the dark, a legitimate exploration and psychodrama exploring the dark side of humanity and human existence and that sort of thing. That doesn't seem to be what these books are. They're just kind of torture porn in the extreme. It's like the goal is not to scare you, the goal is just to make you vomit. And people seem to be reading them not as enjoyable literary fare, but rather as like endurance tests, kind of like what happened in the early 90s, the late 80s, early 90s, with what was known as the video nasties. Video nasties were movies, B horror movies that were just known for being extraordinarily violent and grotesque and everything. And people would rent video nasties, not kids, teenagers and such would rent video nasties, not for the intention of enjoying them, but just to challenge each other to sit through them, that kind of thing. And so with stuff like that, that seems to be more where this stuff falls. And the thing of it is, I feel like there's a lot of people that are reading actual works of extreme horror. Outstanding among them are two books. One is called The Playground, one is called The Slob. They're both by the same author. But if you just search those names with extreme horror, you'll find it, you'll get it. But anyway, in both of those cases, it seems, and from everything I've read, it seems like this is the reaction that people are having. They're reading these disgusting kind of, literary nasties, if you will. They're reading these things and trying to find like some merit of deeper value or deeper meaning in them. And I think what they're running into is what people who have tried to read the Marquis de Sade run into, which, yes, the Marquis de Sade did have some modicum of legitimate social satire in his writing, like when he would write these stories about pedophile priests molesting little children, and everyone thought he was just trying to be gross, when in reality he was, poking fun at something that, what we now know is a horrible scandal within the Catholic Church that's been going on for centuries and that kind of thing. But even then, it's kind of like, I think about, there's a film adaptation of the novel 120 Days of Sodom by the Marquis de Sade. There's a film adaptation called Sallow that sets the events of the novel in modern times. And you watch it, and you just feel kind of dead on the inside. It's a very different feeling from something like a Thomas Harris Hannibal Lecter novel, where, for example, and spoiler alert, in the novel and the film Hannibal, it culminates with Hannibal actually taking tying a man to a chair, drugging him, and removing the top of his skull so that he can take bits of the guy's brain and saute it and eat it right there while the guy's still alive. And it's this absolutely freakishly horrifying scene. And to see this guy like losing cognitive capacity as his brain is removed and eaten, it's horrifying and it's disgusting and it works and it chills you to the bone. It stays with you. But the thing is, there's been a legitimate dramatic arc leading up to that. We've been, in terms of the character development, in all of the characters that are involved in that scene, everything in the story has been guiding us to that point with tremendous foreshadowing and a gradual buildup of pacing, so that this moment is absolutely horrifying, beyond comprehension. Whereas it sounds like, and I say this, I may read some of this extreme horror to get a better perspective on it. I'm just saying these things from an outside perspective. But it seems like these other books, they're just trying to gross you out. It's just a geek show. It's not anything that's paced well or set up well. And I think it was in The Playground, this one reviewer I saw said in The Playground, "Oh, this video is not safe for work or anywhere," by the way, just throwing that out there if you haven't picked up on this yet. But anyway, there's a scene in The Playground, I believe it is, where one character is being forced to have sex with, I believe, his mother, being forced to have anal sex with her, and he is induced to vomit and then use the vomit as lubricant and that kind of thing. And it's like, at that point, yeah, it's like, now I have to ask, why am I reading this? Like, why am I reading this? Going back to Hannibal Lecter, this is every horrifying thing in this book happens because to serve a larger purpose, because that book, and movie are taking us into the mind of this person. This is a psychological journey. There is a larger narrative that's unfolding here and a larger point that's being made. Why am I reading this? Why am I reading a book about a little boy that's being forced to use vomit as lubricant for anal sex and that kind of thing? And so what it makes me think of was specifically was that there's a movie. I love the films of Takashi Miike. Takashi Miike has done some incredible stuff. He's done some really ridiculously bad stuff too. But when you're a director that puts out literally something like 5 movies a year every year, they're not all going to be good. There's going to be duds. And what's interesting is his repertoire is so huge. The films he puts out, his repertoire is so huge. He's got stuff that is like violent, disturbing Yakuza gangster movies, all the way up to like family friendly, the Japanese equivalent of Disney Channel type movies, that kind of thing. And he's got some great movies. Ichi the Killer, phenomenal movie. Audition, phenomenal movie. The Happiness of the Katakuris, phenomenal movie. The Bird People of China, phenomenal movie. He's got one called The Box. It's actually a short film that's beautiful beyond measure, just gorgeous, brilliant film, and it haunts you and startles you in a very beautiful and organic way. But then he has this one movie called Visitor Q, and Visitor Q seems to be the kind of thing that you would see in one of these extreme horror, you would read about in one of these extreme horror stories. And it's literally just without trying to set up without giving you the whole story, the whole plot, because there really isn't one. It's just this long litany of grotesque, depraved, disgusting, tasteless things happening. It's like, Pink Flamingos cranked up to 9 million or something. And so you have, for example, there's a scene in the movie where it's about a family, and there's a scene where the husband character has accidentally, I believe it's been a while since I've seen it, I believe has accidentally murdered a woman, and or a woman has died, and he was about to have sex with her. And he says, it's in subtitles obviously, but he says, "I'm gonna fuck you anyway. I don't care if you are a corpse." And so he starts fucking her, and he says, "Oh my God, you've lubricated. You're wet. This is incredible. It's even in death, the human body can become aroused. This is incredible." This is all while he's fucking her, and then he realizes that what's actually happened is that the corpse has voided its bowels, and what he thought was lubricant is actually diuretic shit that he's now using. What he thought was vaginal lubricant was actually diuretic shit, and he continues fucking her anyway. And then while he's fucking her, while he's fucking this dead body, rigor mortis sits in, and his erect penis gets trapped inside her vagina because of the rigor mortis. And so his wife, who is a heroin addict, goes and prepares a needle of heroin and comes and shoots him up on heroin so that his penis will get flaccid enough for him to withdraw from the dead body. And that's literally 5 minutes in a feature-length movie that is non-stop crazy shit like that. I mean, anyway, the point being, I remember there was this thing, this like bonus feature on the DVD when I saw it that was like some kind of essay that somebody had written, like, don't just be repulsed by this movie. Think about it. Discuss it. What is it trying to say? All of this. And it's like, I don't think it's trying to say anything. I think the goal was to just be disgusting, and he succeeded at that. I may have used this example already, but it's kind of like the episode of South Park where the boys write a novel called The Adventures of Scrody McBoogerballs. And that's what I always think of whenever I hear about this extreme horror stuff or anything like that. I always just think of The Adventures of Scrody McBoogerballs. You're just trying, when Butters writes the sequel called The Poop That Took a Pee. Sorry, but the part where they have Morgan Freeman doing the audiobook reading of The Poop That Took a Pee is absolutely hilarious. It's hysterical. But anyway, that's what it feels like. And so it's that thing, what the popularity of extreme horror, it does not seem to be taking off with, people that are like, the people that would actually be into reading these things, people that are like juggalos to the next extreme or something like that. It seems to be more like people who are reading it and trying, like wanting desperately to find some merit of value in it. And I almost feel like I should try writing one of these extreme horror novels, like put it out under a pen name or something like that, and just see if I could do it, and just not aspire to any literary merit whatsoever, just come up with an endless litany of disgusting things and see what happens, stuff like that. And I could have passive income writing vile, disturbing trash and that sort of thing. Anyway, so that's my feeling about extreme horror, having not read any of it. Now, that said, as I've listened to these reviewers that have been like top 10 extreme horror, they have had these things where they're like, I was really surprised by this one. It seems to actually, there's some really interesting stuff here, that kind of thing. So I'm not ruling it out altogether. But it sounds like the cornerstone works of the genre, like The Playground and The Slob and all of that, are just absolutely revolting for the sake of it. And I don't know that I, have any reason to get into it. If you've read any of those books, feel free to give me your thoughts. Anyway, so I wanted to turn my attention back to Tender as the Flesh and actually do a critique of this. And I had, like I said, my feeling about this book was mixed to negative when I read it. The idea in Tender as the Flesh is that it's set in a near future dystopia where, rather than the present day dystopia that we're currently living in, but a near future dystopia where a pandemic virus has rendered all meat except for human meat inedible. And so what the beef and meat processing industry has done is they've launched a massive propaganda ad campaign to convince people that it's okay to eat human meat. And what they've started doing is they've started breeding human beings specifically that are specifically for consumption. And so it's like a subclass of people. They're born in captivity. Their vocal cords are removed so they can't learn to speak or communicate well and everything. And they have, the ones that are used, the bulls that are used for insemination, and females that are used for, as baby factories and everything like that. It is pretty disturbing. But the thing is, it's like, if you're going to go there, it's legitimately, the thing that was legitimately interesting to me in reading anything like that, any kind of speculative fiction like this would fall more reasonably under speculative fiction, where we are, it's future fiction. Speculative fiction is essentially like Black Mirror, where it's future fiction, where we're speculating on the societal ramifications of certain trends and ideas, that kind of thing. Not specifically science fiction, where we're talking about the ramifications of technological innovations and that kind of thing. But works of speculative fiction, you've probably read a lot of them. The Giver by Lois Lowry would be a good example. Anthem by Ayn Rand would be a good example. The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood, that sort of thing. Anyway, so this falls really into the rubric of speculative fiction, and in that way it is interesting to read about all of the ramifications of this new system and how people have adapted to it, different ways that people have adapted to it, and that kind of thing. One of the interesting modest spoiler alerts. I won't give away the twist ending, but I'll give you some minor spoilers throughout. Like, one of the things that's revealed is there's a religion that's sprung up where people sacrifice themselves to, they sacrifice themselves believing that they're to be consumed, to be processed in the meat processing plants, because they believe they're doing some kind of great civic good by sacrificing their bodies, and in reality, because they haven't been bred for consumption, they're usually just tossed out back and the vagrants eat them and that kind of thing. So the thing is, though, a lot of people are talking about the crazy ideas in this book and everything, and yes, potentially, if you want morbid fascination and you want to see what weird, bizarre thing is going to come next, there's plenty of that in this book. But what was difficult for me is, like, there is really no there's no showing instead of telling, if that makes sense, with the exception of the big reveal at the very end of the book. There's a M. Night Shyamalan what a twist moment at the very end of this novel, in literally the final paragraphs of the novel, that change your thinking about what was going on, a lot of what was going on, and change your perspective about the motives of some of the characters and everything. And it was very surprising to get there. I'm usually pretty good at sussing out twist endings long before they happen, but that didn't occur in this case. The wool was legitimately pulled over my eyes. So that was satisfying, but that said, I don't know if it's worth all of the brain bleach that you're going to have to get through to get to that twist ending. Anyway, but to give you an idea, so it's very much a tell, don't show kind of book, and there's so much opportunity for showing and building up suspense by showing, rather than just telling us what's going on. And I'll give you in just the opening page an example of what I'm talking about. Chapter 1. Carcass, cut in half, stunner, slaughter line, spray wash. These words appear in his head and strike him, destroy him. But they're not just words. They're the blood, the dense smell, the automation, the absence of thought. They burst in on the night, catch him off guard. When he wakes, his body is covered in a film of sweat because he knows that what awaits is another day of slaughtering humans. No one calls it that, he thinks. He lights a cigarette. He doesn't call them that when he has to explain the meat cycle to a new employee. They could arrest him for it, even send him to the municipal slaughterhouse and process him. Assassinate him would be the correct term. But it can't be used. While he removes his soaked shirt, he tries to clear the persistent idea that this is what they are, humans bred as animals for consumption. He goes to the refrigerator and pours himself cold water. He drinks it slowly. His brain warns him that there are words that cover up the world. And so on. And the thing is, you see how heavy-handed that is, to the point that they just want to rub it in your face that this is a book about cannibalism, legal cannibalism. Just look at how gross it is. All those horrible things where literally the book just starts out naming horrible, disgusting things. And the thing is, you might say that all of this goes into character development, but that's not good character development, what's described there. This book, this is a very short book. It borders on being a novella. And honestly, I would have been willing to read a longer book if it had meant that Augustine Bazterrica, I just realized I don't know if this is a woman or a man. So I'm just going with neutral pronouns. But anyway, but if this author had taken, I would have been willing to read a longer book if this author had taken the time to build up the suspense. That first paragraph, those first two paragraphs that I read, should have actually taken longer. You should have taken about 10 pages to show this guy have him wake up in a cold sweat. Say that he's been having these horrible dreams. Don't say what they are. Go, show him go to the window and light that cigarette and start to calm down a little bit. And, have him look out the window at the slaughterhouse in the distance and start gradually building it up rather than just outright telling us up front that we're now living in a world where human beings are being bred to be slaughtered. Don't just outright say that. Slowly build it up. Take us into the world of the book. That's the thing. Fundamentally, when people are reading fiction, they want to escape the world they're currently occupying, even if it's into a world that's absolutely horrible like this. They want to escape what they're currently experiencing and get into something more, get into a different world. And so your first, as a writer, you need to ask yourself, how do we serve the reader? And if you put yourself in that mindset of how am I serving the reader, it's like the writer Avi, he's a children's young adult writer, had some advice I read in an interview of his that was really brilliant. He said, writers don't write writing, they write reading. And that's such a very insightful observation. You have to think about how your writing is going to be read by another person. And and in that mindset, we start to think about what is the other person, what is this reader wanting out of the story? How do we tailor our story to what a reader is wanting? And this is actually how we get good stories. Because you think about it, every story that you've read that you've liked was a story that catered to what you wanted out of that story. And so to do that in a horror story like this, we don't, and this is where probably why this book gets thought of as extreme horror, we don't just jump into a geek show and start grossing people out. We need to start building it up little by little. And that's the thing, so many of the big buildups in this story don't feel like big, they're not, or I should say, a lot of the big shocks in this story are not set up in such a way as to be shocks. We're told, we are told what we're seeing rather than it basically is like this. We're told what we are seeing rather than being allowed to look at it. That's the thing. And so if you're going for literary merit and you're going for something that's actually scary as opposed to just gross and revolting, something that's actually going to disturb people and really chill them, then that's the angle that you need to take. There's absolutely no buildup in this, and it is an absolute triumph of tell over show. Anyway, so that's my opinion of the book. And also, by the way, while there is a really surprising what a twist ending, I will also say that I don't think it's well. It is it has to do with the motivations of the main character, and I don't think it's well supported throughout the rest of the narrative. It feels it feels, because we've been so inundated with his thought process throughout the book, it feels bizarre that he would do something that contradicted that that thought process right at the very end in the last few chapters. So it's very it's just very unsatisfying that way. It is surprising, you won't see it coming, but it just didn't do it for me that way. That's my thoughts on the book as a literary, from the perspective of a literary analysis. But I wanted to close with something else, and that is this quote on the back here. It's from Locus Magazine. It's a review quote. It says, "Wonderfully translated, not for the faint of heart. More than just a critique on how capitalism and greed dehumanizes a society, Bastarika digs a little deeper and shows how our unlimited capacity to adapt allows even those with a conscience to normalize the most horrible, outrageous, and awful deeds." Well, first of all, I would disagree that Bastarika has. Oh, she has received several awards for writing. Okay, it's a woman. Anyway, so I would disagree that she has done that. I would not think, I don't think that that's actually articulated well here. What we have is just a world of people that have already adapted these things and kind of accepted it all. So it doesn't really resonate that way. But anyway, what I wanted to point at was this thing that, yes, it's a critique of capitalism, and and that's what irks me, because yeah, you always have to love the people who win the game, who have a best-selling book or something like this, win the game of capitalism by critiquing capitalism or condemning capitalism. Here's the thing. And that's what really bothered me, really irked me, is this book is trying to make the point that capitalism dehumanizes us to the point that we would be willing to eat each other and all of that, even if only on granted, even if only on a symbolic level. But the thing is, to say that this is where capitalism would get us in any way, shape, or form to a point where we're eating each other to survive and that sort of thing. You need to go look. Again, most of the people who take these positions have obviously never done a nanosecond of study of world history or world events and that kind of thing. If you bother to take a look, throughout history, it's been communism and socialism that have driven people to these extremes where, like in Maoist China or in the old Soviet Union and things like that, things actually did get so bad where people really were practicing cannibalism. The governments were having to put out propaganda posters reminding people that it's unethical to eat their dead family members and things like that. So that's just what's always so irksome to me when I hear something like this that's supposed to be a critique of capitalism. It's like, seriously, you're going to accuse capitalism nowhere has capitalism escalated people to the point that they were eating each other. Communism has. Learn the lessons of history, especially if you're going to dig into, if you're going to try to make some kind of grand satirical point and act like you have some great insight into the world and how it works. So anyway, those are my thoughts, my preliminary thoughts on extreme horror, and my thoughts having read Tender is the Flesh.